Welcome to Frontend Hire. This is Ritik, and in this video, we will refactor a profile page to be more maintainable. At a high level, this video will teach you how to separate out the presentation layer from the data fetching layer. You can also call it as separating out the UI from the business logic, and how to use mock service worker for mocking API calls, and on how to use React query for fetching and mutating the data. For this series, I built a small project and you can find the repo here. I'll also attach the link to this repo in the description. Where can you encounter this problem? To make it easy for you, I have a repo with the starter code here. Let me quickly clone the project and show you the file with the problem. I have cloned the repo here. Just make sure you're on the branch 0 problem. And this project uses pnpm. So just make sure to install the dependencies using pnpm. And the dev command is pnpm dev. Let us check the file with the issue. In the source folder, you can find the app.tsx file, which is going to be the file which we are going to work on. Also, my dev server is running and it uses Wheat. So the dev server would be running at localhost 5173, and I have the preview to the right here. And if you just refresh us, you can see that there's a loading profile screen at the start, and then it changes to the actual component. Now let us look at the file. All right, this file has around 115 lines. That's not too bad. But if we try to read this code, there are a couple of issues here. First thing is the conditional rendering. We do both if not profile and is loading, we return the loading profile screen. This is wrong because even for empty state, we are returning the loading profile. It is incorrect. There's a possibility where the UI is inconsistent. And even though we are using edit mode state to dictate which component is shown, the amount of code within this conditional is a bit too much. And we can definitely refactor that to a dedicated component. The next issue I see is the use effect. In my opinion, it is one of the deadliest hooks out there, and it should be avoided whenever and wherever possible. In our case, use effect is needed because it talks to an external service, assuming this timeout is meant to mock a API. So we can definitely abstract this use effect into a custom hook so that it at least does not live with the presentation layer of our component. So that's what we will do. The next issue I see is that there is a lot of state, and this state could go out of sync. For example, if you forget to update the loading state, or let's say if you forget to update the form data again. So ideally it's better we refactor a couple of these state objects to a single state or something. We'll do that. And when we bring in React query, this makes handling all these updates quite simple. The final issue which I see is the set timeout being used to mock the API call. This is too simple and does not accurately represent a real API. And the set timeout is also resulting in a memory leak over here. And I think having a better fake APIs to work with would elevate our development experience and better reflect a production environment. So we'll do that with MSW. So what are the solutions? As discussed, we will separate out the UI from the business logic. We'll bring in mock service worker to better mock these API calls. And then we'll also use React query for handling the fetching and mutating part of the data. I recommend you try this refactoring yourself first before you watch the rest of the video. Also remember, refactoring is always going back and forth a lot. So that would also happen here, but I'll try to keep it as simple and short as possible. All right, let's see what the solution is. All right, let us start by separating out the UI. This edit mode is a very good condition to separate out the UI. We can directly see that there's a component which deals with editing, and there's a component which deals with displaying the data. So let me just quickly refactor this. I'm just going to take this profile display, and you can also use AI for this part. I'll just do it manually because I have my notes here and I don't want to go out of sync myself. And you see my windsurf editor is helping me here, and I think I am okay with this output, except for the fact my button to switch to editing mode is missing. See, I can make mistakes here. This output is missing, so I'm just going to copy and make sure that is over, not missed. And I'm gonna pass this set edit mode prop. And again, this, I don't like this TypeScript output. I'm just gonna type it out myself. It's gonna be void, but it takes a Boolean value. And let me destructure that out. So this is good. Now I can use this instead of this. This is better. So once you have better types for your function at the top, your windsurf or cursor would do a better job. That's why TypeScript is a win here. Okay, now let us separate out this profile form into its own component. Again, this structure remains the same. I'm just going to call it profile form. I'm just going to copy paste the entire markup here. Again, it takes form data which is nothing but the same type as my profile. It takes my handle change function, which is nothing but, yeah, this is fine. And I think we also take the handle save. And again, AI is helping me out here, so that is fine. Let me destructure these now. Cool. So let me use the profile form here. Right. So this is better. Let me check if my functionality is not lost. All right, this is fine. I don't seem to have any errors in the terminal too. All right, this is cool. So this is my usual way of doing things. I usually separate out the components first within the file and then move them to a different folder depending on what the use case is. So in this case, I usually like to separate out into features, not into just terms of components or hooks or something like that. I prefer to separate out things into features. So I'm just going to create a folder called features, and I'm just going to create another folder within here, and I'm just going to call it profile. And within the profile, first I'm going to put this type there. So I'm just going to create a file to hold all my types. I'm just going to call it types.ts. So we can just put this here, and we want to export this type out. Next, I think we have a profile form and a profile display. So I'm just going to create two files, profile form.tsx and profile display.tsx. Display.tsx. So I'm just going to copy my entire profile form here. Again, I want to export this as my default. And we can now import the types from within this folder. That's done. And let us also move the profile display. At any point you feel lost, you just check my course notes. Right, now we can import the things from our feature folder over here, and we would have a very good project structure. Right, as you can see, most of these imports come from my dedicated features, which is profile. We can also make absolute imports and do other stuff too. But for this course, I'm gonna stick to this regular import style. And you can already see we now have 66 lines of code, which is better in my opinion at least. And we have not lost any functionality yet. And I hope there are no errors here. Yep, this is cool. I was just checking my notes and I forgot to rename the profile type. And I figured it's a good opportunity to show you how to do this in a one-shot approach. So all you have to do is go to the main file, which exports the type. And I'm assuming there's a better shortcut, I would say, which would be, yeah, it's rename symbol, function plus F2, and you can just rename this to profile type. The reason we are doing this is to not conflict with any component which you could call profile. It is very much possible. So I'm just gonna stick to profile type. You can also use a convention like T profile. I prefer to keep it a lot more explicit, and I call it profile type. And this particular change would impact all your files. So you don't have to worry about missing out something. So yeah, that's something I wanted to add. Great. But all right, can we improve the code further? For example, in our app.tsx, we have this handle change, which it no longer has to worry about because this handle change happens only in our profile form. So we can move that stuff there. Let us do that now. So we're going to remove the handle change. So I'm just going to close this file, bring in my handle change from here. I'm just going to Control X, cut it. I'm going to paste it here. It still takes the form data. Again, we don't need the form data because we can also have the local state of form data within this component. So I'm going to just call it. In fact, let me just copy paste the form data from here. Yep. And we need React use state. So we can just bring in use state. We don't need handle change, and we don't need it to call this as form data anymore. Instead, we can call this as initial form data. So I was using Command D shortcut to bulk select all my references here, and I can just spread it out over here. And this is working, and we don't need the handle change anymore on this type 2. And I think nothing breaks in this file, but in our app.tsx we are missing out on the set form data. We don't need to worry about it here because we will be sending it as initial form data. There is handle save, which is taking form data. So what we can do is we can pass the form data here. So we can pass the form data here. It's going to be a profile type, so this will be fixed. We don't need to send handle change, and the form data becomes initial form data, and here it becomes profile. And our handle save complains because it has to now pass in the form data. So I'm just gonna pass in the form data here, and on click we can just pass the form data. And that should fix most of the type issues. Let's check, nothing broke here. John something. Yep, this still works. Loading profile still works. All right. At any point you feel like it was a bit complicated or you got messed up because of types, you can check out the branch 1 solution part 1, and that should be a good match to what we have done till this point in the video. And in the next chapter, we will improve the fake APIs. All right, now let us try to work with the fake APIs. I don't like that this file also deals with the APIs and they are just simple timeouts. So let us make them into promises, and we'll also store these promises in a dedicated file. And within the profile, the feature profile, I'm going to just create a file called api.ts, and this would store all the endpoints related to this particular feature. And we can see that we basically have two types of endpoints. One is to fetch the profile, and the other is to update the profile. So I'm just going to call them as export function fetch profile, and another function which does the save profile. And we want both of these to be promises. So I'm just going to return a new promise, and it should resolve. Again, we need a timeout to fake that stuff yet, and my editor gave me some output. I'm just verifying it. Yeah, we also have this fake data which is coming from here, so we can just put this here and we can just use this here. And I'm just going to rename this into uppercase so that I'm clear that it's a constant. So I'm just going to pass the fake profile here, and we can also import the type. And our fetch profile looks good. Similarly, let's create a save profile, and this will take an object. It's going to be the updated profile. It's going to be of the profile type, and it would also return a new promise, resolve, and set timeout. Yeah, this looks good. Let us import these endpoints over here. So it's going to be fetch profile, then data, and I just don't need any more of all of that stuff. We can simply do set profile data. Set is loading to false. So we can remove this, and we don't need this timeout actually. We can remove that timeout too. Okay, some issue here, which is argument of type unknown is not assignable to type of set state action profile type. This is cool. Worry about this in a second. Let's also handle the save part of things. So I'm just gonna do a set is loading true first, so that to indicate there's something happening again. And we're gonna do save profile, form data, then data, set data. This is fine. I just want to call this as saved data to synchronize with my nodes. All right, and again we're getting the same error here, which we're gonna worry about in a second. All right, the wait should still work despite these errors. These are TypeScript errors, and that's fine. We'll work with it. All right, this still works. Our APIs are better, at least their promises now compared to regular timeouts previously. Now, these errors are pretty much the same and are happening because the promises right now are always unknown. And the simplest fix here is to explicitly type out these promises as profile type. And this is also how you do it in a production code base. There's no other way to do this because most of the times these promises are usually used to mock something external, and TypeScript will never be able to infer the external types. So you as a developer have to do this. There is no other way here. Of course, there are a couple of tools such as trpc which will help you do this at runtime, but for now, this is the solution. And with that, our errors should be gone. Great. Now let us use mock service worker for mocking our API calls. So MSW is the industry standard way to mock APIs. It can be used on the client side and it can also be used on the server side. And it is client agnostic, meaning you can use it with React, Vue, Angular, Svelte, Next.js, or even Remix. So you can read the documentation, but I would prefer to do it with my nodes because the documentation uses npm. I use pnpm. So these instructions will also help you if you're using pnpm. So we're going to install MSW as developer dependency. All right. And since we are in a client-side project, MSW can also work with servers in the sense with Node.js runtime. But since we are on a regular React project, it's a client-side project, and for MSW to do its thing, we need to register a service worker. And what is a service worker? So basically, they're quite versatile and can do quite a few things and run in the background, so it doesn't impact your main event loop. And they enable a lot of things like caching, intercepting requests, offline support, push notifications, etc. You can read more about them on MDM or any resource on the internet. But you see the intercepting request, that is what MSW actually does, and that's why they also need a service worker here. Again, the docs has the instructions. I'm just using pnpm and this is a command. I'm just gonna copy paste it from my notes. And this will basically create my worker in the public. You don't have to touch this file ever. It's just there and just forget it. All right, let me run back my dev server. Before we can start using the MSW, we need to also set up the worker. Right now the JavaScript file doesn't do much, so we just have to use MSW to set up things. And I'm just going to create a mocks folder which would store the MSW stuff. I'm creating a browser.ts file which will set up the actual worker, and it is called setup worker and it comes from our MSW. So export const worker is equal to setup worker, right? MSW has no, yeah, this comes from the browser. Cool. And now if you see, this takes handlers array. It can either be request handler or a WebSocket handler, which is what we'll set up now. Let's set up the handlers dot. I'm just storing the handlers in a different file. Let's create the handlers. Export cost handlers. It's going to be array. So we need to mimic the fetch profile, which is going to be a get call, and a save profile, which is going to be a patch call. And MSW exports a HTTP method, and we can basically use that over here. The first method is going to be the get, and most of the times the backend lives on a different server, and that would be HTTP, localhost, and your port. Right now Wheat is on 5173, so usually if you have a backend, even a local development environment, it would be on a different port. That's what we are also doing over here. You can also use a more realistic endpoint like api.getbackend.com or something, but I don't want you to do this because you'll have stupid cause errors in your console and in your network tab. And MSW is only meant to mock these APIs in your local development. You don't want to do this on actual production server. And the complaint is, yeah, we need to also pass the resolver over here. So within the resolver, what we have to do is we have to return the JSON object. In our case, it's going to be the same fake profile. So we're going to return HTTP response, again, something MSW provides us with, a JSON object And I'm also gonna just say the status is 200 because it's gonna be a successful API operation. Similarly, we can also do a patch request to mock our save endpoint, and this will be having a request object, and we can say this is going to be an async operation because we're gonna just use a small delay to mimic the actual save operation. We're gonna have the updated profile from our request, and we will have to await this. And right now we don't have any type information. Again, what you can do is you can typecast it as profile type, and it's gonna be little better. And we can also import the profile type, and we can quickly update the fake profile here with the updated data. This is fine. Again, it's a mock. I don't worry too much about this stuff. And we are going to await and don't use timeouts. Instead, we want to use something MSW provides. It's delay. Timeouts will not work here. You need something that works with MSW and the service worker. So they provide this utility function delay, which does this stuff. You can either pass 1000 or don't pass anything. If you don't pass anything, it's going to just use a random value, right? So it uses a random delay. And we can also again return the response with updated profile statuses. Yeah, this is all cool. Now let us try to use this. So again, the setup worker needs these handlers. I'm just gonna spread them out here. Now we can just call these endpoints. Here comes the fun part. We don't need the fake profile here. We don't need the timeouts to, we don't need the promise to. We just gonna return the const data is equal to await. And now we should also make this async fetch. And again, Windsurf is helping me here. This is where my endpoint is supposed to live now, right? And I don't mention anything else because it's a simple get call. And this would then give me the response object. Let me return rest.json. It's a regular fetch, right? So this is looking cool. Did I miss anything? And we can just return this data. Again, I'm just gonna typecast it to profile type. Otherwise, yeah. Otherwise, it would again be unknown. If you hover, you would see it would be any, right? Yeah, data could return anything. I'm just assuming it would always return profile type. In a similar way, let's also fix the save profile part of things. Again, let me make this async const data. Again, it's also going to be profile type. It's going to use the method patch, content headers, application JSON, and this all looks good to me. And I can just return the data. This looks cool. Alright, now let's see if things work as expected. I'm just gonna refresh. Alright, things seems to be broken now, and the errors would be a little tough to understand why it's broken. But if you go back to my notes, you can see that registering a service worker is an asynchronous operation. So we need to defer the rendering of our app until the worker is registered. So back in our main.tsx file, again, all this is there in MSW docs. That's the reason I know this stuff too. We're gonna just defer this our app creation, the root app. We're going to defer that till we have the worker set up. So again, it's going to be a synchronous function, enable mocking. Just going to check if my process.env, I'm just going to check if process.env, okay, my TypeScript is struggling, but Windsurf is doing some good work. If it's not development environment, I'm just going to return. Otherwise, we're going to import the worker. Wait, import my mocks browser, and we're going to return worker.start. We'll work on this process in a while. the type error over here. And now we're going to enable mocking. If that is successful, we will do all this creation of our actual app. So this is fine. Now, in order to fix this issue, we can simply install the node types, which I'm going to do with pnpm. So you can copy this command. It's nothing but pnpm add types node save dev. That should fix your type error. Cool. And if you refresh, things will be working, and in the console you would be seeing that MSW mocking is now enabled, and it will also give you any logs about the request it intercepts. And if you actually look at your network tab, let me clear this and let me refresh. You would see there would be a proper API calls. And let me reveal the JavaScript bundle. Why am I not able to see the... Is there an issue? Disable cache. What is the issue here? I've switched to Chrome. It looks like my Zen browser seems to be having a problem detecting the mock APIs. But now in Chrome, it works perfectly. You can see the proper endpoints over here in the network tab. And all of this comes from MSW. You don't have a backend, but you're getting a proper development experience with APIs here. So that's where MSW shines. Also, whenever possible, try to work with real APIs. MSW is great, but still it's not real API. The moment you get your real APIs from your backend team, replace it, delete your mocks. Or maybe you can retain those mocks for testing, which we will not cover here. But that wraps up things, and you should have a working example now. Great. And if you think you're lost somewhere, maybe MSW gets updated in the future or something, just go to this branch, one solution part 2, and you should have a working checkpoint to see whatever I've explained so far. Great. So in the next section, we're going to work with React Query, and that's going to be quite fun. Great. Let's see how that looks. Now remember what I told about use effect? I don't like them and they can potentially cause bugs. So this is where React Query helps us. It handles all this data fetching part of things, data update part of things, and really helps clean up a lot of things. And that's what we're going to do in this section. Also, don't get me even started on caching and retrying. What if your API fails, right? What if you use the same API elsewhere, right? There's going to be a lot of duplication, and React Query handles all of this for us. Implementing any of that from scratch is going to take a lot of time and you'll still miss a lot of edge cases. So let us install React Query. React Query comes from Tanstack. And I'm just using pnpm add Tanstack React Query. You can copy the command from my notes. We don't have to worry much about that. All right. And again, the documentation covers all of this. I know this because of the docs too. So back in our main.tsx file, we need to import the query client. It's like context for your entire app, which is used by React Query to handle the deduplication, caching, and everything else. And this import comes from React Query, Tanstack React Query. It's called query client. And what we also need is a query client provider. Again, that also comes from React Query. And we can just pass the query client here. And this pretty much sets up React Query for us. Now let us start using React Query in our app.tsx file. The first thing which we're going to do is we are going to see what React Query even gives us. So within React Query, there are two concepts, which is queries and mutations. Queries is all the data fetching part and mutations is all the data update part. So we're going to work with query fetching part, which is nothing but use query. And there's different ways to also fetch data within React Query. The most basic way to do is through use query. And what use query takes is it takes object and it takes a query key, which is mandatory. React Query uses these keys to uniquely identify each API call. So make sure you don't use the same key for different API calls. It will mess up a lot of things. So just make sure you know what your keys are, and always try to use an array, even though you can pass a string. That's what React Query recommends. I'm going to just call it profile. And what is a query function? In our case, it's nothing but our fetch profile. I'm just passing the fetch profile and nothing else. This would give us a lot of things. Data is loading, is error, and a lot of things. We just need to observe what data is for now. I'm just going to log it to the console. Let's just check. All right. You see, we have our actual API call here. We don't have to do any of the set profile. We don't have to do any of the set is loading stuff. Cool. Now we could replace this use effect, right? I'm just gonna remove this use effect and use our data from here. I'm just gonna rename the data as profile. I'll also get the is loading state. I'll also get the is error state from use query. All of this is provided by use query. You don't have to do anything else. And let's say I also remove this for a while. And also comment out handle save for now. We'll just worry about the fetching part of things. And I'm also going to fix this check which was wrong previously. I'm just going to check if is loading. I would just return loading profile. And if there's no profile, I would just return no profile found. And if is error, we're just going to return error fetching profile. Great. And still a couple of things are breaking, which is, yeah, nothing much. It's just the handle save complaining. But rest of the things are fine. Refresh, and yeah, query works. And you can see that it simplified that use effect. So yeah, it did simplify the use effect. Now let's work on the handle save part of things. Great. Fetching was handled by the use query hook. But what about mutations, aka the update of a data? So React Query gives us something called use mutation to handle such updates. Similarly, this takes a function which is called as mutation function, and we are going to just pass our save profile. And we can also pass the on success, on failure, and everything else. So on success, what we're going to do is we're going to just set the edit mode back to false. And what you need from the use mutation is to destructure the mutate. This mutate function is a function which handles your actual mutation, and all you have to do is pass your data, whatever the save profile takes, which is nothing but the updated profile, which is the form data here. And use mutation also gives you a is pending state to let you know if there's a pending mutation in process. If that is the case, we can just simply return. Again, Windsurf is helping me a lot here and seems to be done. And let us try this out. I'm gonna try to edit something, John something. Okay, the patch request did go, but the data is not updated. What is happening here? This is because the mutation has no way to know if it has to also update any fetching part of things, right? And React Query helps you do this using something called query invalidation. You get a use query client hook, which you can use on success. In fact, again, Windsurf is helping me out here. All you have to do is invalidate the queries with the query key profile. So you're telling the React Query that if a mutation occurs and it is successful, invalidate all the queries with the query key profile, meaning this is going to invalidate this particular fetch call, and React Query will go in and fetch that data again. So if I save my file and try to edit the profile again, John something, and now data seems to be working properly. But if you look at your network tab, let me clear out. Let's see what happens when you edit something. I'm going to call it John something something. The first call was a patch request. The second call is your get request. So this query client invalidation is telling React Query that some data is now invalid. So invalidate all those queries and refetch that data. And this gives you a nice synchronization between your fetching and mutation part of things. And this is quite a common pattern across most apps, and that is perfectly handled by React Query. All right, things are working properly. We have a very good setup with React Query and MSW. But what we can do is we can still abstract out these hooks, and I'm going to do the same here. First thing is I'm going to have a dedicated hook for the fetching part of things. I'm just going to call it use profile. And what it does is it returns me the output of use query. And I can just simply use that over here. Again, this is a pattern I use across all my apps. So it's going to be the same profile is loading is error. And we also abstract out the mutation. And I prefer to call this use profile. I think I'm going to call it use update profile mutation. And this handles two things. It can handle the query client invalidation as well as the mutation. Again, a general pattern you would see. And we see that now we are also having to pass the set edit mode. Instead, what I like to do is I like to pass the on success as a property so that it's quite flexible and I don't have to pass a lot of specific context. And I'm just going to pass on success. So if there's on success, we just call that. All right. We can also replace the. It's looking nice, and I'm just gonna call this is. We don't need the spending part of things too, right? And we need the is spending. Need the spending mutation too. All right, things look cleaner. Meaning now I can also separate these out into my profile folder. The first one would be use profile hook. I'm just gonna export, quickly import all the things that are needed. Again, I'm gonna import my use profile here. I'm just gonna import this to separate out this to a different file. Use update profile mutation. Export default. In fact, I should make my use profile also as a default export. Again, this is the pattern I like. You can choose the pattern you like. Just make sure you're consistent. All right, and back in my app, we can clean up things. This was changed to a default import. Things look a lot cleaner. My hooks also are quite domain specific. I know this hook is responsible for getting the profile, and I know this hook is responsible for updating the profile, and it is a mutation, right? So this is a lot cleaner. And we have also separated out the concerns to dedicated file. Let's test it out. I'm just gonna call it. Okay. Cloud something. All right, things work. Now, do you think we can further clean up our code base? One thing which I don't like is the handle save. I don't like that my app.tsx has to worry about the saving part of the things when my profile form could just do that. So I'm gonna just take my handle save and let my profile form handle it so that my mutation also doesn't live in this particular app.tsx file. I'm just going to import my use mutation here. And there's one thing which my mutation is doing, which is setting the edit mode back to false. Otherwise, I won't have a way to go back to my display component. So we still have to pass something to indicate that a save operation was done. So I'm gonna update my props to pass on save, which would handle that set edit mode part of things. And I think I can just call this handle save now. And my form data lives within this file, so there's a closure there. All right, and back in my app.tsx, I can clean up things. And now on save, all I have to pass is what would happen on save. Const on save, I just want to set my edit mode back to false. So that is what I'm gonna pass here. It's gonna be on save and it's gonna be on save. Similarly, I think we can also simplify the API for profile display. I don't want the profile display to know that it can set either false or true. So I'm just gonna call this const on enable edit mode and we'll set that edit mode to true. So this would also be on enable edit mode and on enable edit mode. And in my profile display, I can also call this on enable edit mode and it doesn't have to worry about passing a value now. Enables this. All right, so my profile display API is a lot simpler. So is my profile form API. And so is my app.tsx file. Great. Is there something else we can improve? So one thing we can definitely improve is, you can also observe it in my edit profile form. My enter key doesn't work. And that is because the profile form is actually a div and not a form. And also it is possible for me to set an empty string for first name and it doesn't look good. So let us update our profile form to first be a form and then quickly apply some quick client-side validation. So now this form should be calling the handle save and not the button. So I'm just going to remove the on click here and it's add a type, which is going to be submit. You don't have to put a type submit here, but I like to be explicit here. Otherwise the default is also submit. And my form on submit does the handle save part of things, but this will create another problem, which is it would refresh the app. We don't want to do that. We want to prevent that default form submit refresh. So my handle save will now take a react.form event and we don't have to worry about that. And we simply have to prevent the default behavior of that form event. So this means now when I press enter, there's no client side refresh. My React handles the event. And I think we can quickly also add some quick client side validation through using the required field. I'm just going to make my first name, last name, age as required. Let my company name remain an optional field. So I'm just going to make it update the label to also reflect the same. I like this way to mark my optional fields. It's a lot more explicit and helps me understand which is required and which is not required. I assume every form event to be required unless and until it's specified as optional. I don't like to use the asterisks. It's more of a design thing which I like to do. And with that, I think we should be in a very good state. Great. Throughout this mini refactoring, I assume that you learned quite a few valuable lessons about improving code quality and maintainability. One key recommendation I have is don't be scared of refactoring things. Continue refactoring whenever possible. Right? It could be even updating a variable name or a function name or moving around stuff, because your project will evolve, and with that also your clarity changes, right? And this regular refactoring is what keeps code base maintainable, and honestly you should do this every now and then. All right, and if you like this particular mini refactoring series, leave your feedback and suggestions in the comments, or else you can also do it on our Discord, and I will see you in the next video.